Finance Minister in 2022 under the Unity Government. He is also an author with works including Saving the Planet, Climate and Environmental Lessons from Malaysia and Beyond. Along with him today is Yang Bahagia Datuk Sri Town Planner Dr. Maimunah Muhammad Sharif, who is also the Mayor of Kuala Lumpur since August 2024 and Malaysia's Special Envoy for Sustainable Urbanization. She also serves on the International Advisory Committee to the COP29 Presidency on Urbanization and Climate Change. Previously, she was the Under-Secretary General of the United Nations and the Executive Director of UN Habitat from 2018 to 2024, and the first woman to serve as President of the Seberang Pride Municipal Council and Mayor of the Penang Island City Council. A town planner by profession, Datuk Sri Maimunah is an honorary member of the Royal Town Planners Institute of the UK, a Fellow of the King's Foundation, and a jury panel member of the Lee Kuan Yew World Cities Prize. We also have Ms. Charlotte Mufbai, the Vice President, Chief Sustainability Officer at Petronas. She is an award-winning leader driving sustainability. Since joining in 2021, she has advanced the company's net zero carbon emission strategy. Previously, she was Vice President of Sustainability at Quinor, where she developed its first sustainability strategy. Charlotte also serves on the Board of Trustees for the UN Environment Programme World Conservation Monitoring Centre in the UK. Last but not least, Ms. Meenakshi Raman, Head of Programs of the Third World Network, TWN. Ms. Meena is the Head of Programs at the Third World Network, a Penang-based non-profit organisation which focused on sustainable development, climate change, and North-South issues. A practicing public interest lawyer and climate negotiations expert, she has attended 16 COPs and co-authored A Clash of Climate Change Paradigms. Ms. Meena also served as the first active observer from developing countries on the Green Climate Fund Board from 2012 to 2015. And with that, Mr. Feroz, whenever you're ready, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Puan MC. Assalamualaikum and good afternoon to all. So I know we've started this panel a bit late, so I've done my side negotiations and we've got 15 minutes extra for this, right? So we still will have some time for some Q&A from the floor, right? So as usual, I will warm it up, right? Actually, I only got easy questions. I suppose they will give the hard questions to this, right? So we have a stellar heavyweight lineup here to share thoughts on this discussion, talking about reflecting of COP29, key takeaways, and future pathways on this. So I'm going to start off with Datuk Sri Maimunah. Datuk Sri, I have to admit, I'm really having a fanboy moment here. I've been a big admirer of your work, at UN Habitat. I really left big shoes to fill over there, but UN's loss is KL's gain, right, on this. So I would just like to start off by posing the first question to you to set context from more of a global perspective, Dr. Sri. How do you see the COP29 agreements address urban resilience and sustainable cities, especially for developing nations? What are your thoughts, Dr. Sri?
Yeah, thank you so much, my fanboy. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good afternoon. Salam sejahtera dan salam Malaysia Madani. Thank you so much for this opportunity, YB, for inviting me to these sessions and also to share. And for here, I would like to thank the President of Azerbaijan for giving me the opportunity to speak at the opening of the COP29. I think this is the first time being given a third person to speak after the President and the Secretary General of UN and then me. And at the time that when I mentioned about this opportunity and during the speech, you can still listen it through the YouTube, it's still there. And at the same time, I would like to bring forward that I always bring the issues of action on the ground. Either it's climate change or sustainable urbanization. And I'm very happy that as the advisor to the COP29 president, I have the opportunity to also to talk to the Azerbaijan team and where they mentioned that is COP29 is an enabling COP. COP29 is a finance COP. If you know that it's COP27 in Glasgow, I tried my level best to bring in the local climate action summit to be held in Glasgow. I failed. Yeah, but even though I failed, I continue my struggle, and I managed to bring in the local climate action summit in Sharm el-Sheikh at COP28. I think I managed to convince the Prime Minister of Egypt, I think because he is also a planner. So he knows the importance of sustainable development, and he knows the importance of bringing the COP to the local government, if you're talking about cities. And I'm also very fortunate to have the opportunity to speak to the President to continue the work that from the COP28 to COP29. And because at COP28, we had this ministerial meeting for the urbanization, because I realized that in previous COP, I think the attendance is attended by the Ministry or Minister of Environment. But when you talk about sustainable urbanization, it's a very complex. So we managed to bring the Minister of Environment, Finance, Housing to one session, they call it Ministerial Urbanization Session and Local Climate Action Summit, and it came out with sustainable urban resilience for the next generation. Now go back to the COP29, I managed to convince and also the government to continue, the government of Azerbaijan to continue the work of the COP28 and report to the COP29 and also have the ministerial meeting and on urbanization. And at COP29 they came out with CHAM. CHAM is the and at the COP28 CHAM is the Coalition of High Ambition for the Multi-Level Partnership. I think this is very important to look at when you talk about the enabling COP and finance COP. We have to look at the financial structure. When you talk about loss and damage fund, how much is the loss and damage fund really trickle down to the cities, really trickle down to the communities? Sometimes we don't know where the money goes. But I really put forward to say that please look at the architecture, the financial architecture, because the countries that suffers most is the most vulnerable country, and they emit the least carbon emission. So these are the areas that we look forward, and at the same time, I'm also very, very happy to see that they link it to the cities and the SDGs, because 63% of the 17 SDGs or 169 target is in cities. So SDG will be lost or won in cities. So I think this is very important to see that the enabling COP and the finance COP. I'm very happy to see that even though we hope to get more, but at least there's a commitment from the member state for the, well, we hope that it will be trillion, but it's only in billion, but at least there is a resolution and also a decision to involve local government in the NDC, the LDC, local determinant contribution, to be also included in the NDC. It's not only at the national level, it's also at the local level. And at the same time, I think it is very important also to look into the three things that I put forward. One is the leadership and political commitment if we want to talk about sustainable urbanization and climate change. Second is about funding and also the capacity, the expertise that we are looking at. And the third is on the governance. So in overall, I've seen that the COP29, at least they are openly, transparently talk about finance, loss and damage. But I hope that we can continue at COP30. And at the same time, I'm very, very fortunate to see that the flow from the COP26, 27, 28. I had an opportunity to COP24 and 25, but still I think now what we Malaysia have to do is that we have to bring all this resolution, the decision, whatever it is, to action. That's why I say that action is now. We cannot wait anymore, because that's why I mentioned that the climate change is real, and we have to act now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sri. You know, such passionate pointers, right? Thank you for also pushing COP29 to be an enabling COP, and also to point and bring up the question. A lot of commitments on the money, but actually what really is trickling down, right, on that side. So I think that brings a good segue to move on to YB Nick. Dr. Sri gave a good overview on the global perspective of the COP29. If I could pose the next question to you, what would be the most significant takeaways for COP29 for Malaysia, and maybe even yourself, YBN, particularly in terms of commitments and outcomes relevant to our national climate agenda? YB?
Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera, salam Malaysia Madani, Chair, Moderator and distinguished panelists. If all our panels are like this, we wouldn't have the 34% female representation problem that you saw just now. So it's good effort by the organizers today. I think for me, this was my second COP, right? I mean, so I'm a very, very junior compared to Mina, Tan Sri Zakri. These are all people, veterans who have been on the front lines of the trenches and seen how this thing, COP has developed over the years. Shall we start with the good or the bad? So I think the good thing is the fact that we finally come to some conclusion on Article 6, right? Because when we talk about carbon credits and all that, there was no certainty for many, many years, since 2015. But we managed to finally get some conclusion on that, and we see the follow-through for Malaysia, where we have signed MOUs with South Korea, as well as with Singapore, because now we know the parameter. Of course, there's still some other things to work through, but that is a positive start. I think we are working on our carbon market framework in Malaysia. We are moving towards carbon tax and all that. So this is very hopeful. Similarly, this also helps us when we finalize our climate change bill. We started the consultation publicly since November last year. We've got the input, and we had another series with some of the civil society. So some of the developments from Baku will help us when we complete our climate change bill this year. I think that the challenge is, of course, going back to the issue of money, and this is even before the re-withdrawal of the US from the Paris Agreement, where, when people are talking about 1.3 trillion US dollars, but eventually it was only 300 billion from government annually, right? And then the rest is to come through various means, about supposedly 1 trillion. And I remember when there was, I can't remember the term used, but basically when the president tried to find a solution to this and invited all the head of delegations, and we were discussing about it, and you could see the anger from the developing world, right? I remember the minister or the head of delegate from Panama, saying that you are expecting us to borrow billions for our floods, for our the problems that we get, the erosion. But at the same time, you have no problem in funding conflicts that cost trillions of dollars. And I think that was a real, that was a strong sentiment, and it united regions. It was not about religion, it was not about ethnicity, it united a lot of developing countries. So I think that's why we are quite moving forward, we hope that we can really leverage on Belém, on Brazil, going back to Brazil, right? Where all this started, where the biodiversity and the climate change COP actually began in 1992. So I think this is very important. We have to really leverage on Belém. And if you ask me, by that time when we went to Baku, we already knew the election results in the US. So we expected. I mean, the withdrawal is not a surprise. So we have to find ways and ensure that at the end of the day we still can progress. Is it easy? No. Right? US is the biggest economy in the world in terms of emissions. They are number one. But we need to do our part, and I think just strengthen other cooperations with China, with the EU, among developing countries, with the newly emerging countries, to find how we can move forward and progress with regards to climate change. With regards to Malaysia, we will continue to do our part. Our climate change bill, we also took note of some of the comments from civil societies that not enough was mentioned on adaptation. So as we improve the draft, we will take into account of that. At the same time, we are working on our national adaptation plan that is coming up in 2026. And as we've seen, the floods, the coastal erosion is happening in Malaysia day in, day out. And the urgency of this, as mentioned by the mayor, is we have to act now, right? There is no plan B. Just as there's no planet B, there is no plan B. We have to act now, and I think that is the urgency. And whatever happens in the world, I think enough people in the world, and with the new technologies that's coming in, there is enough that we can actually start on and to continue the momentum to build a more climate resilient, not just Malaysia, but a climate resilient planet.
Thank you, Webby, for sharing, especially the fact that I think there's now a lot of questions coming up from the status quo perspective, and I think the title of your new book could be representation of the role Malaysia can continue to play, right, on this. So in keeping to the developing economies sharing, I'll just move on to Ms. Mina. Right? I think Webby, Mina is also a good example that even though you can be in climate for long, your hair can still maintain black, right? Mina, my question to you, is, adaptation. What are the critical gaps in the COP29 outcomes when it comes to addressing the needs of developing countries, particularly in the context of vulnerability of the ASEAN countries? Your thoughts, Mina?
Feroz, like greenwashing, you can do blackwashing. Thank you very much. And I don't have much time, so honorable guests and particular Baby Nick, and also Dato Sri Maimuna, an old friend both from Kuala Lumpur, Mayor of Penang, so we know her very well, and we're so happy you're Mayor of KL, and you're talking about sustainability in KL. Very quickly, just to say, I think the Mission 1.5, which the Brazilian presidency is touting, is really mission impossible. And so I think we really need to take a very, very hard look. I saw a lot of upbeat from the MGTC presentation. However, I think the reality is that when Donald Trump talks about drill, baby, drill, I'm sure many of you must have read Martin Wolf of the Financial Times, not exactly the most progressive economist, but even he was talking about burn, baby, burn, as a consequence of what the United States is doing. Now the point about this is that no matter how much Malaysia can do, no matter how much ASEAN can do, with the United States out of the Paris Agreement, it's an abdication of a huge responsibility. And we already know that we have crossed the 1.5 degree threshold last year. And the IPCC reports talk about 500 gigatons of carbon space that is left to limit temperature rise to 1.5. The US drill, baby, drill, and the consequent, all these BlackRocks and JP Morgan and all the banks who were talking about net zero
We are not a big fan of net zero for a lot of reasons. We don't have time to discuss that. But many of it was actually greenwashing. But even that little greenwashing is now off the charts. They can't even talk about net zero in the United States. So, and the latest that I also read that Donald Trump says that if the EU doesn't import US oil, they will impose tariffs on the EU. So we really, I mean, friends, I think we do need another session to really deep dive and take a hard look at Belém and what the expectations are. Now, on the global level, with the US exit and the kind of backsliding of the climate agenda and the right-wing rise in the EU, Germany going right, you're not going to have climate change up the agenda anymore. Now, what does that mean for countries like Malaysia and the rest of the developing world? Now, there's only so much money. They're not, and I want to say, it's not 1.3 trillion that they're going to be providing. There's not even the 300 billion. It's mobilizing 300 billion. It's not a provision. The US was very clear. This is a voluntary contribution with developed countries taking the lead, and it's only about mobilizing. It's not about provision. It's not about the Article 9.1, it's about the Article 9.3. So for those of us who are following, it's actually the details that we must pay attention to. And India, on the final hours. Now, why was India so angry? They were angry for a couple of reasons. They were angry because if you look at the paragraph 8, or actually it's the paragraph 8 of the NCQG decision, which is about the new goal. The 1.3 is a nothing. The main goal is in paragraph 8, and it's only about a 300 billion mobilizing. And it's by, the next review will be by 2035. 10 years for a review. And the GST, by the way, is not in 2026, it's in 2028, the next global stock take. So, what are we stock taking when there is going to be absolutely no money in terms of real funds that are going to come? But the hope is that there is a decision there in the NCQG decision which says significant resources for the Green Climate Fund, for the Adaptation Fund, for the other funds of the JEF included. So what we have to do is to pick up the pieces and say this is where you need to put significant resources in these funds so that developing countries can access them. For instance, the Green Climate Fund, $13.9 billion. It's not insignificant, nowhere near enough, but still a very important fund. So many of us in civil society are going to be campaigning on that level. Now, the Indians were very angry because if you look at the details of the decision, one of the things that's going to count to the mobilization is the NDB counting of finance. What the developed countries and the shareholders from developing countries as well. So India said, if you are going to say MDB outflows are going to be counted, then you are asking developing countries or also shareholders in the MDBs for that contribution to be taken into account, which is unfair. Now, the unfairness of it all is really that the Azerbaijani presidency gavelled without even giving India the opportunity to take the floor. They knew India was upset. India had already alerted them, but they gavelled nevertheless. He didn't even, Professor Zakri, I don't know whether you were there, you know how they did it? Next, NCQG, pub, he didn't even look up. Anybody objections? They knew. So they ran through a decision which was really unfair for a big, large country like India. They have done this in Doha before, when the Russians objected to something. They did it in Cancun when the Bolivians were objecting over something. So this process cannot happen this way. The whole UNFCCC crisis now is really how you make decisions. And maybe the final point for us, we all talked about the drill baby drill and how it's going to be burn baby burn. Belém and the Mission 1.5, and I said it's going to cross the threshold. How do you expect the NDCs of developing countries to be ambitious? Many of it is probably going to be conditional. And so if you add all of that, and they'll come and then the US is out of it, you will actually come to a huge emissions gap. And who is going to fill it? Are developing countries going to fill the ambition gap of the developed world?
So where is common but differentiated responsibility? It's going out the window. So we are at a crossroads of a multilateral process, and if you look at what's happened in Gaza, finally there was a solution, but look at what they're doing in the West Bank. So this is a politics of impunity, no respect for rule of law. And the final word I'll say is that it's not about civil society alliances alone. We really need a stronger South-South alliance, because that's the only way. Then the finance decision splintered on the last hours because the G77 was disunited. So it's not enough, Minister, for ASEAN. We really need real South-South solidarity. If we want to save ourselves and save the world, we have to be united much more powerfully. And I think PMX is leading the way, and we can do more. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina, for sharing critical gaps and also sharing how this geopolitical movements is reshaping reality when it comes to climate action, and even questioning the fundamentals of 1.5, right? Thank you for sharing. And in a lot of your sharing, alluded to a lot of private sector action as well, and even Nancy, I always get the acronyms wrong, the NCQG, the additional talks about 1 trillion, mobilization from private financing, and you cannot have private financing if you don't also talk about private sector, right, on this. So good segue for Charlotte as well. So Charlotte, next question for you. What would be key lessons from COP29 that can guide energy companies, and maybe even just companies in general, right, in balancing the demand for fossil fuels with the transition to renewables? Your thoughts? And unfortunately, just like how private sector in most of these G2G discussions, I'll just have to ask you to keep the thing a bit shorter because of time.
Well, thank you very much for that question, and thank you very much for inviting Petronas to be here today. And I must congratulate NRES on the panel. I'm not congratulating myself here, but the composition of it, because of course we need government, but we also need non-state actors to be engaged. So civil society, local government, business, associations. So pretty perfect. We're just missing a banker or an investor, and we would be kind of there.
I think there's a few in the floor.
Yeah.
So bankers and financiers, we expect a question from you to complete it.
And I think this is a genius move, because as we heard, all the conversations, negotiations are so tough. But there is a very strong undercurrent, I would say, in the whole world, including also countries that have had recent elections. The undercurrent is very strong. I think the current and the future generations really want a greener, cleaner future, and that's what we're all working towards. And I'm no expert on what the city and the C40s are doing, but the cities are so powerful in this, and business, and with the support and the scrutiny of civil society, I think we're going to do really well. So COP29, how did it guide the energy sector? So there was quite a lot to unpack for us, I must say. And Malaysia endorsed, we think, 10 COP29 presidency declarations and pledges. And there are at least 5 of those that are very relevant for the energy sector, and in particular for Petronas. So one is the Global Energy Storage and Grids Pledge, which is about increasing the storage capacity, energy storage capacity, 6-fold by 2030, as well as building, enlarging grid capacity to 80 million kilometers by 2040. The other one was the Green Energy Zones and Corridors Pledge. So this is about interconnecting regional and interregional power systems. So India is a very good example of this. Then we had the Hydrogen Declaration, which is about scaling up the production of clean, renewable, low-carbon hydrogen and accelerating decarbonization of hydrogen production. We also had a declaration on water for climate action, and the Baku Initiative on Human Development for Climate Resilience. All of these areas are very relevant for Petronas. We are decarbonizing our core business. We also have, we are investing in new businesses such as renewables. We're looking at electric vehicle infrastructure, hydrogen, biofuels, and so on. So all of these declarations are very, very relevant for us. Also, as we are formalizing our priorities, what is our role when it comes to just transition? So this is again very helpful. and also around water and resource efficiency. So there's a lot of relevant aspects for business and energy companies to take away from that. And whilst I have the mic, very briefly, I also wanted to mention that we, together with other oil and gas players and associations from ASEAN, came together. We actually announced a communique, a joint ASEAN energy sector communique that restated our commitment to decarbonization, as well as a specific focus on driving down methane emissions that are so potent. So this is a fabulous communique available also on Petronas' website, and it brings together the ASEAN community, the energy community, in support of the chairmanship this year. So we really hope to drive that forward.
Thank you, Charlotte, for sharing how energy companies can support the just transition, and also how Petronas is doing this ASEAN coming together for greater impact as well. Now, I am really conscious of time, and I really want to give an opportunity to the floor, right? Because it's not always you can assemble these climate avengers in a certain sense, right, on stage. So please, anyone who would like to pose a question, I think there's an open mic thing. Yes, Tan Sri? There's a mic for Tan Sri.
Thank you. This is not a question, but really a comment, and in particular to the Minister. I think what we need to reflect is what we are going to do next year. And you evoked the Earth Summit in 1992, when the Minister was only 10 years old. It's really inspiring, really. So we need to get our action together, and we have that opportunity. Number one, we are chairing ASEAN. So we need to make use of the ASEAN camaraderie to put out a statement, but also to link with the superpowers of the world, namely Brazil, of course, that will be there, but also look at the Congo Basin. Is one other area of diversity in this world. Secondly, YB Minister, we need to really go at it on this CBDR, this common but differentiated responsibilities, which have been abandoned today by countries like the US. They don't even want to talk about it, but it is a very basic principle. And Mina knows this very well. Second, and related to that CBDR, I think this aspect of funding, the climate finance, is very key. So just to say that this is a golden chance, let's show the world that Malaysia has it. And in 1992, Malaysia is one of the leading lights of the developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Tan Sri, for your comment. Any other questions?
Just to echo the point that Tan Sri has made, I think the issue of multilateralism, whether it's multilateralism is going to die and probably see a demise, just like how League of Nations fell apart. And America has definitely been partly responsible. When we read history, in the 30s, it's moved towards closing itself to the world. And similarly, we are seeing a similar trend. They did that when they pulled out of the gold standards in the late 60s. We saw the huge capital boom. And what has caused probably the acceleration of the 1.5 that we talk about today, because at the end of the day, it's about where the money has gone to create destruction. I think we need to forge a greater, alliance across South-South. And there needs to be a concerted effort, because this is not going to be a single country, single region issue. And I think, unfortunately, there's lack of leadership in this. And as what Mina has said, G77 has definitely failed and continues to fail very significantly. And the question is there going to be any space, and whether Malaysia wants to provide the leadership in the absence of any clear driver to do this. And the context of ASEAN, though we want ASEAN to play a role, unfortunately ASEAN requires to come as a singular voice. And we know different countries in ASEAN are not likely to come back. In the case of ASEAN, the commitment on climate is far back. In fact, it's not, though we have an ASEAN Center on Climate Change, but I think the outcome thus far is definitely far back. The voice of ASEAN is very, very small, much smaller than the small island nations that's out there. And the third thing, I just want to make an observation to what Dr. Srimamuna has said. I think it's a call to action. Can we find also, in a sense, that create demonstrative models of change so that we can start building and celebrating excellence of change across cities globally? So to put a more concerted effort to showcase and to push for what they call government funding to create excellence and encourage other governments around to push to remake cities.
Thank you, Dato'. I suppose the question is, in the decline of multilateralism, can Malaysia fill this void in the leadership agenda? And also, could we then propose new innovative change models that will get where we want to go? I think this is an open question to all, but of course, YB Menteri, you'll have to start us off. What's your thoughts?
Thank you. I think combining the answer for both in a way. Definitely, we need to actually leverage on our mega diversity, including with regards to climate change, right? Because mega diversity is always mentioned in the CBD, COP, but sometimes it's not seen enough or rated enough in the climate change COP. But it plays a huge role, and it is interrelated. So rightfully, Tan Sri, the Amazon Basin, the countries there come together, they have a science panel. The Congo Basin, they also come together, they have a science panel. But actually, we have also started in Borneo, in heart of Borneo, science panel. I think Dr. Mazlin from Sunway is very much involved. But we are pushing so that it can expand beyond Borneo, but to be the Southeast Asian region, because we also have, high quality forests here in Thailand, in other parts of Indonesia and Philippines as well. So that, I agree that it's something that we need to harness. But moving on to the issue of G77 and the challenges, I think it's partly because the success of some countries within G77. Because you have to understand, just giving you an example, Singapore, Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia, they are G77. Congo, Bolivia, Mexico, they are also G77. So the level of development is already very different. So I think this is something that is very big. Partly it's above my pay grade, but I think as Mina mentioned, I think PM has been working hard to slowly, find a role for the other countries in a way, in a world where the US is sort of not exerting itself in the right way, right? So I think he is navigating that. It's not easy. Our two biggest trading partners are China and the US, and we want to be able to trade and to talk to everyone. So, but I take your point, right? And ASEAN is definitely not enough. We have countries in ASEAN where they band themselves with small island nations. It doesn't stop for me, because these are groupings, right? You can be part of small island nations, you can be part of ASEAN, you can be part of G77. But I think whatever it is, ASEAN should be the first port of call if we want to have a regional cohesive bloc. But it should go beyond, and we have to look at other countries as well, so that we can leverage. Malaysia alone on our own, we are too small, right? So I think that is where we can make a difference. But although we are small as a country, our leadership, when we see the case of apartheid, we see the case of Palestine in the past, during the Earth Summit, we have done it before, right? So I think we are in the right time with the right leadership with our Prime Minister, but it's something that we have to work on. And ASEAN is actually the best. Our ASEAN chairmanship provides us that room that we have to seize. It's already started, it's already end of the first month of 2025, so we need to really focus so that we can take advantage of this year.
So I've actually been signaled by the organizers that we're out of time, but because I'm such a fanboy, Dr. Sri, I'm going to bend the rules and 2 minutes.
Yeah, I just want to suggest that, you mentioned about just now the US now pull out. But I would like to put forward, let's use the voices of cities. Even US pull out. I think the mayor, California, Florida, New York, they are opposing, they are with us for the Paris Agreement. So I would like to put forward that use the voices of cities. Of course, cities, there are many categories that we are, some are poor, but the voices, I think that would like to have the movement, because there will be for ASEAN level, on the 10th of August to the 15th of August, it will be the ASEAN and Governors Forum. So maybe we can use this to bring the voice of ASEAN and bring the voice of cities globally. Yeah, make noise. Then I think that is at least we put forward our voices and try to make a change. So that is my last intervention. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sri. We'll always never have enough time when you have such a distinguished experts and passionate people as a panelist. So please join me for a round of applause. Thank you very much, panelists, for your sharing on this. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Sri.
Thank you, the moderator and panelists for fun.